come here to chew bubble gum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubble.
It's the connection.
Yeah.
You can mute me until,
Why would I do that? That's weird. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon. It is Tuesday, October 17th, the year of our Lord 2017. And you've got a belly up to the bar. It's great to see you back. And we've kept your seat, as we have, we've kept the seat of another individual. We're going to have do something a little bit different tonight. But first, I have to tell you, that Fluffy is going to be a bartender tonight. He pours with the best of them, and the lava lamp is in fact lighted to my left, your right. And if you happen to be listening on YouTube, on the SHR Media channel on YouTube, you can watch there live. You can also watch live on the SHR Media Facebook page, Facebook Live, SHR Media, and also on Lone Star TV, courtesy of Dan Butcher. We don't water our drinks, just like we don't water our conversation, politics, religion, crime, culture, economics, race, sex, science, law. We talk about it all here at the saloon. Nothing is sacred, the speech is free, but the booze is not. All we ask is that you flush the toilet, jiggle the handle, and don't forget to tip your waitress. Tonight in the saloon, we have something that we haven't done before, and we were talking about it, and we decided, I decided that I'm going to do it tonight. And that's this. We have not really had one of these before, but I thought, okay, let's do it now because it's past due, I think.
This is an SHR Media Network special report.
And what we've decided that we're going to do is speak about the Las Vegas shooting. And essentially what this comes down to is Sackhead Shaun, who is obviously here tonight if you're watching, and I think it was last week or even week before, we were talking and texting back and forth like crazy. And we're going over a host of different theories and causes and probabilities of the shooting. And we both thought, it might be kind of interesting to see if we can go over some of this because so much stuff has changed. It's been only about 2 weeks. And usually in the first 24 hours, some people call it the first 48, you generally have, or you better have if you want to solve the crime, most everything hammered out. Well, in this particular instance, in terms of the Las Vegas shooting, we knew who the gunman was. Well, we knew who the dead guy was on the carpet in the room on the 32nd floor of Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. But after that, things got really squirrely to the point that both Shaun and I agreed, and we have some connections to law enforcement and know some people who know some people.
Who knows some people?
Who know some people.
How does this work? Do I just talk into this?
Yeah.
Okay, I just didn't know.
Yeah.
I've never done anything like radio before, so I just...
It's that strange silver thing.
You'll have to help me out.
That happens to be. With the weird adjustment that apparently you're going to have to kind of jiggle every once in a while if we get an odd buzz.
I'm an odd buzz anyway, so...
I'm beginning to think that, unfortunately, it's that mic cord instead of the connector.
We can work on that.
Back.
I can work on that.
In any event, we have here tonight in the SHR Media studio, co-owner of the SHR Media Network, Shaun Lewis, and I thought it would be interesting to go over all of this. We started with so much stuff. Initially, it was odd because ISIS came out and said within 24 hours they made a claim, and the Daily Mail, the UK Daily Mail, came out and said, this dude is linked to ISIS.
Yes.
And they were claiming responsibility and saying the gunman converted to Islam months ago. And that came out on the 2nd of October, which is the very next day. Now, the shooting occurred on October 1st. Mm-hmm. And the very funny thing is, and it's not funny at all, is that Shaun and I have been to Las Vegas. We went there in July for Freedom Fest.
Just there. Right there.
And, yeah, we were just right around the corner. Weren't we kind of across the lot from that place?
Yeah, we were, during one of our ventures out, we were almost in it. And I know the area quite well. I've been to the Mandalay Bay enough times to know firsthand exactly what's around there. Amazingly, I was sober enough to also remember what was around there, which is always a very good sign, to say the very least. But it's first and foremost, BZ, thank you for having me this evening.
Well, it's always a pleasure because we're going to hear you tomorrow night. But you mentioned the odd thing is that you're sitting in the wrong spot.
I am so comfortable right now. So this was my original spot years ago. When we still had a producer, when Sako was still with us, I would sit here, and all I had to do was talk. And it's quite comfortable over here. It's nice on this side. I'm not going to lie for a second. I have my coffee. I brought cookies with me. I'm all set to go. I have my notebook out so I can actually take notes and write some comments for the show, which I used to do all the time. But obviously, as you're at the control panel, it is it's very difficult to do.
You're busy over here doing a bunch of stuff. But I see you have Maui cookies. What are Maui cookies?
Pepperidge Farm Maui cookies. And I bought these on a whim. And they're milk chocolate, sweet coconut, almonds, butter, and eggs and vanilla. And I'll tell you what.
No chocolate chips?
They do have chocolate chips. I said that earlier.
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
It's all right, old timer. It's all right, buddy. We'll get you there. But I'll tell you what. You dip one of these suckers in a cup of coffee, goes down like butter.
Butter.
Like butter. It's absolutely freaking unbelievable.
So we spoke about this. We saw, and we've done this twice now. This is twice that we've been to Las Vegas, and we've seen exactly when we went to Freedom Fest both times. Planet Hollywood was the first one, and what's the one with the Eiffel Tower? That's where
the Paris.
Were. The Paris.
How appropriately named.
Yes. And when you get a room in those places, you're in a tower.
Yeah.
And you can see you can look right down on all the people, the pools, etc., because Las Vegas is nothing but one series of continuing towers. And you think about the perch that makes, and you can fully well understand why it is that this guy decided to choose what it is that he chose. But right off the bat, the funny thing was ISIS makes the claim out of that. But then the FBI came out and they parsed very carefully a response to that. And they said that they determined that there is no connection between the Vegas shooter and ISIS or international terrorism.
Well,
no connection. And then they later parsed that and said there is no
immediate
evidence. No immediate
connection or evidence.
Right.
And that's what they said. And I love the sound of this mic. I feel like I'm like totally retro 1950s nailing it. This is a great sound. I love this. But so we have the shooting incident. And after the shooting incident, obviously the first 8-9 hours, there's brief updates given. The first one was that the shooter was neutralized. The law enforcement response that I hate to say, the rigmarole, but you do. You know what they're talking about in the first 8-10 hours. They're talking about the response, people being treated, how many sick, how many injured, and the status of the perpetrator. That was standard. And by the time I was on the East Coast during the shooting, by the time I woke up the next morning, and you and Jersey Joe and everybody else, I'd already been asleep, so I didn't even know. So you start doing what we do, and we start immediately trying to find information.
Jersey Joe, that night, Jersey Joe and I were texting back and forth for probably
4 or 5 hours.
A good 2-3 hours.
Yeah.
Just back and forth about this, that, and the other thing, all sorts of theories and whatnot.
Well, and what I love about Jersey Joe I hate to say I love him in those type of incidents, but he and I did this with the Chelsea, New York bombings and some other incidents because of his medical training. He's great insight to have as to triage, what they might need for this,
Yep.
what they might need for that. How do we get those people help right away? He's just a bevy of amazing information. But by the time I woke up the next morning, they'd already released, hey, there's no obvious connection to ISIS or international terrorism. And I said, well, wait a minute. Okay, so there wasn't an ISIS flag in the shooter's room.
Correct.
There wasn't a letter said, haha, I was ISIS and I did this. But the fact that that was released so quick, and look, when you go down to the Pulse nightclub shooter, the guy was inspired by ISIS, wrote a manifesto, everybody knew it, and they still said there was no obvious connection. So you can't go by what the feds say in the first 12 to 24 hours. And I know what they're doing. It's damage control, right? They don't want to have that huge backlash against an individual community, in this case the Muslim or ISIS community, because if they come out quickly and say, hey, this is ISIS, people are going to be pissed. And right, wrong, or indifferent, they may respond. I remember after 9/11, there were several incidents at businesses owned by people from the Middle East, even if they weren't Muslim, where people had kind of taken things into their own hands, appropriately or not. And I think after 9/11, the initial federal response is to try to downplay everything, let everybody calm,
Yep.
and then start to bring it back up and start to release slowly. So that's what they did in the first 12 to 16 hours. And I don't agree with it, but I understand it, if that makes sense.
The funny thing was the message that came out from ISIS, which was so quick, said, the Las Vegas attack was carried out by a soldier of the Islamic State, and he carried it out in response to calls to target states of the coalition. The group's news agency, Amaq, said, in reference to the U.S.-led coalition fighting the group in the Middle East. Now, we know that for a fact back in May, I think it was, of this year, ISIS had already sent out warnings to ISIS elements or other people who were ISIS sympathizers in the United States, go to Las Vegas, make an attack. That was in public. That was reported. That was nothing new.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, boom, you get an attack in Las Vegas. Let me back up a little bit. Let me ask you a question about this.
Well, and before you, and I hate to interrupt, but on that question, one of the things too that you have to keep in mind is, just before the incident, there was some raving lunatic woman running around, right at the event.
Oh, yes.
Yelling, "You're all going to die."
Yep.
And again, can I start tonight by saying I'm not a tinfoil hat wearing person. I'm not a conspiracy theorist.
If I were intelligent and if I were actually planning this thing, I would have had that video up and ready to go.
But I just like to say that
because
at the
it's
beginning.
on video.
It is on video. So I'm not a tinfoil hat wearer, but this is that woman, and I want you to remember that when we start talking about the receipt at the hotel, because that's something that I want to kind of tie those two together. But please go on with your thought. Sackhead Shaun doesn't wear tinfoil hats. Go on.
However, with this caveat, and the reason that I wanted to have the show tonight and the reason that you were kind enough to acquiesce and come on is there is almost nothing commonplace about this shooting. Just when you think that it's going in one particular direction, it takes a turn. And so in my history, I have not had a case myself personally so incredibly bizarre as this one. And you can make, if you take each one of them individually, you can make a fairly decent case for, well, this really doesn't mean anything.
Right.
But what you do is you attempt to identify a pattern or a trend in law enforcement from the beginning to wherever it is. You just let the evidence take you wherever it is going to go, and you just follow along with it.
Right.
There is almost not one aspect of this that is standard. It seems as though day by day something different happened that threw a monkey wrench into it, and the investigation took a different turn.
Yes.
In terms of
Timelines.
what was said, what specifically wasn't
Mm-hmm.
said,
Very specifically.
in terms of timelines, the revising of timelines taken individually, that doesn't mean a damn thing.
Well,
Because you're going to have mistakes enter into the entire event itself.
Well, and before, and you and I have talked about this, to give credit to the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, you have to understand, and the people out there have to understand, I did a Facebook post about this. You have 58 who perished. Another 530 or 525 people who are injured either by bullets or in the crowd running away, whatever, they're injured. You have a homicide scene, mass shooting homicide scene that incorporates a large hotel, all the ground in between, concert and fairgrounds, and beyond. Because you have to remember, the bullets that didn't hit anything still traveled and hit other places, the gas tanks being one of them. You have to triage and treat. You have to get everybody to medical care. You have to neutralize the potential shooter. And then you have to try to lock it down and start preserving evidence. The first 24 hours to have them do all of that would be amazing. You're looking at 3 to 5 days, I bet, by the time they got that last evidence marker in place, and they're probably still finding things. But you have to understand, they're still processing scenes as we speak.
You make an excellent point, and we're going to get to a specific situation that has to do with that. But you're right. There were, let's tot them out. There was one massive crime scene down below on the tarmac. Mm-hmm. There was a second crime scene up in the room. Basically, two rooms linked together. They are in the corner of the Mandalay Bay.
Huge.
Then there's going to be some kind of a crime scene that indicates that you had to get from point A to point B, meaning that this guy had to go down the hall, had to go downstairs, etc. So now you've got another element, which is all the massive amounts of video that must be in place there. Then you've got the crime scene at this guy's house in Mesquite, Nevada.
The vehicle first.
Then
he got the vehicle.
And the vehicle, so that's
which had explosives in
it.
And that changes how you approach the vehicle to process.
Yep. And then, that's 6. Then there was the crime scene in Mesquite, Nevada at his house. Then the crime scene at what they called Reno, but I think it's actually Verdi, Nevada, which is west of Reno.
Right, it's right up there.
It's on Interstate 80. So now you've got 8 separate crime scenes. There may be more, as far as I know. We just do not know.
Well, and if wherever the guns were traced back to, we'll have an element of investigation. The thermite purchase, the vehicle, will have an element of investigation. You are also looking at the planes that he owned. It also brought us to the Philippines for the girlfriend.
Oh, this thing went around the world.
So, I mean, you're looking at all of this in an incident that lasted an hour. There's no other incident that I can think of in the United States that has paralleled this type of incident. Yes, 9/11, but it was a totally different type of terrorism incident. And this was... to have a mass shooter, the only thing I can think of that would be close would have been Columbine. That would have been close.
Yeah, but that was really, really isolated, very isolated.
It was very isolated, but I'm talking about how big the building was. That was a very large school. That's a lot of scene to process. But it stayed in one building. You look at the Pulse nightclub, stayed in one building for the most part. Yes, the investigation brought them to the car, to his house, and to see some other people. But the crime scene itself was condensed in a very small building, which is why he was able to be as homicidally effective as he was. This was the same type of idea from the shooter and whoever perpetrated this. It was a target-rich environment, which I know it sounds horrible when I'm talking about fellow Americans who have perished, but it's a reality. It was high volume, high target. It was the same type of thing that the Pulse nightclub shooter, and I'm relating the two because it happened so recently. He may have had a manifesto against LGBT, gay, and lesbian communities. Maybe he did. But he chose to do it in that bar because there was a lot of people in a very condensed area with minimal protection. And he knew it. He'd scoped it out. He'd been there before. People say, well, he was also gay. None of that matters when you're talking about carrying out. You're not talking about motive. You're talking about effectiveness.
Tactics. You're talking about the tactics of that situation.
Absolutely. Totally different. So you now have this ginormous crime scene. And you have to understand, and BZ, you know this better than I, the amount of personnel that it takes to cover that.
That's another massive issue. Everybody seems to think that there are only two agencies involved in this, the Las Vegas Metro Police and the FBI, and that couldn't be more wrong.
No.
Because you've got the state of Nevada elements involved in it. You've got local and state EOD technicians involved in it. You've got BATFE agents involved in it for the explosive aspect,
ATF.
and also the weapons aspect of it. You've got local evidence techs making evidence collection. You've got the FBI's ERT, which is the evidence response team,
Yes.
making collective efforts on that. You've got whoever did the autopsy, wherever the body was taken. You've got those individuals making the examination.
Well, and before we leave the crime scene, let's talk about other people that are involved, right? You have LA County and LAPD sent evidence technicians. You have evidence technicians from all over the West Coast who are assisting in this investigation.
It was huge, massive.
You have, so that's just the crime scene itself. And when I talk about from all over, I mean all over. You have evidence dogs coming in. If anyone's ever worked a dog and knows how you work a dog, they're looking for scent of people or bullets, and they can do actual ammunition rounds, live or dead, etc. And when they're out in those fields, you have to believe that they were running dogs out there to try to pinpoint any sort of munitions that may have fallen. You start looking at
through the automobile, through the room, for him, any clothing.
You're looking at thousands. And when I say thousands of people involved in this investigation right now, that's probably a low number. I would guess by the time the number is done, people who have touched this investigation in one way or another, you got to be looking at 2,000 to 3,000 people.
I would say that might be about right. You've got a massive amount of people that are involved in that kind of thing. The odd thing that I found out when I made mention of this UK Daily News report on the very next day in their relationship with ISIS, one of two U.S. officials discounted Islamic State's claim of responsibility and said there was a reason to believe that the shooter had a history of psychological problems. Stop. That's on the first day. The second day after October 2nd. So what did we learn? We learned that, there was another conflict. No, he didn't really have psychological problems.
Right.
He may have been dispensed a Valium or two. These days, probably 50% of the United States is on some kind of psychotropic med. So that isn't an aspect. So it simply continues. Then following that, ISIS doubled down on that. Mm-hmm. And about a week later...
Well, and let's talk about the psychotropic drugs for a second.
Okay.
I want to go back to that. You have the FBI releasing, without touching their computers, his computers, you have the FBI saying, hey, we have no known evidence to terrorism. But we know nothing about this guy. We were able to find his doctor pretty quickly, and we were able to know that a couple times he's taken Valiums. And I said to myself, in the days of search warrants, HIPAA, and a lot of other things, how did they get that information so goddamn fast?
We're going to go into a whole bunch of aspects like that. But the problem is the conflicts don't stop.
Right.
They keep going. Just when you think that you're going in one particular direction, you discover that it's a blind alley, that there's conflicting information. And that's what makes this thing so devilish. You and I both know that homicides, major cases, have what are called holdbacks. And
yes.
Holdbacks are... you decide that you're going to hold back certain information so that if you receive information and it includes whatever may be part of what you've decided to hold back, then you know that the person providing that information, that's good information. So the question that I asked from the very beginning is, what were the holdbacks? How many of them? And my thought was there must be an arseload.
And here's why you know there's a ton. And I talked about this today with my friend Nate and my friend Nick at work. You know there's a ton of holdbacks because of the press conferences that are being given with nothing being said. There's a lot of updates that aren't updates. There's a lot of talking that isn't anything. This poor sheriff has And I feel for this guy because I think this guy is a legitimate guy.
He's a good guy. I know where you're going. He's a good guy. I believe he's one of the pack of good guys.
Yep.
However,
the political pressure is incredible.
Who can say that they've experienced in the United States anything like this before?
Exactly.
And yes, he's the sheriff, essentially the police chief of a large metropolitan major city.
One of the biggest departments in the country.
And no one has gone through this. So You're right. I feel for this guy.
I do.
And the beast needs to be fed. The beast demands to be fed. But you're right in terms of he kept coming out, and I guess he realized he had to feed the beast. But in terms of doing that, he ended up saying almost nothing.
Well, and that's the FBI response, right? Even if we have nothing to say, we're going to keep giving you guys press conferences to keep you happy. We saw that with the Boston Marathon bombers. And look, if you go back, and I know we're up against a break, and I know we're going to go down this road, but if you go back and you watch any documentaries or the Boston Marathon movie with Mark Wahlberg, you'll know that they have information that they're acting on that nobody knows about. If you remember any of the documentaries, they were going after White Hat and Black Hat. They're trying to figure out those guys. 2.5 days before the rest of the world knows those guys existed.
Right.
The other thing that's different, and I know we're going to get into this at some point, but I want people just to kind of roll this around. We talk about how many people are involved in this investigation. There's no leaks. That tells you the capacity. The capacity.
That gives you, that lends credence to a whole bunch of stuff, any number of doors that you could open.
Oh, yes. And you slam them open right now.
And here's another thing. We were talking about the FBI. We were talking about ISIS. There was a guy, Special Agent Rouse of the FBI. And again, that second day where the FBI said, no, there's nothing. This is not ISIS.
Right.
Then this guy says in a statement, and again parses very carefully, says that the Bureau has determined to this point there is no connection to an international terrorist group. If that isn't parsing,
very specific words get chosen.
I don't know what is.
Very specific words are chosen. No known link to international terrorism groups. Different than international terror and international terrorism groups. And you could say, well, how? Because he may not have a card being carried that says ISIS on it.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean, and I'm not saying he is yet. I'm not having that conversation right now. But that doesn't mean that he hasn't pledged himself to a cause.
They did not say isn't radicalized.
Yes.
They said groups, and
yes.
They said absolutely nothing about an individual.
Absolutely.
Folks, we're going to take a break. Be right back. You're listening to the SHR Media Network. It's the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon. Don't go away.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, it's Shaun from the Sackheads Radio Show. Also one of the owners here at the SHR Media Network. Are you opinionated? Have you ever wanted to do your own show? Have you ever heard somebody like the Sackheads and go, yeah, I could probably do that better? Well, now's your chance. Send me a 5-minute clip at sackheadsradio@gmail.com, and maybe you can be part of the SHR broadcasting team. sackheadsradio@gmail.com.
Times are dark. The people are misled by corrupt politicians, lied to by establishment media, and deceived by the false messages of Islam. A nation looking for direction needs a guide. It needs a man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker, SHR Media, Pundit Press Radio, and YouTube through the SHR Media page for a different kind of commentary on the unpleasant blind guy. Because the truth is not always pleasant.
In a world controlled by corrupt politicians,
You got a business. You didn't build that.
a team of ordinary men emerge from the ashes to give voice to the voiceless and hope to the hopeless. Sackhead Shaun.
Dude, I'm not saying calf for the stupid promo.
Sackhead Clint.
All good friends of ours usually show up drunk.
Also starring Sacco as as the producer.
I'm a little bit drunk, 'cause I'm drinking.
They are the Sackheads Radio Show. Every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific on SHRmedia.com.
The bloviating Zeppelin. He's big-footed enough radio shows to last a lifetime, courtesy of Sean, Clint, Ken, and Jersey Joe. Now it's time for him to waddle on his own 2 feet via the glorious SHR Media. Gird thy loins for the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon. Coming soon to ossicles near you. Excelsior.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are listening to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, live and direct from the SHR Media Studios. Not far from the Bill Mill, the belly of the beast, behind enemy lines in occupied California. We're talking about the Las Vegas shooting tonight, and there's so much to talk about. We were initially talking with Sackhead Shaun, co-owner of the SHR Media Network, about ISIS, and one of the first things that came up, and how the various people that are involved were parsing the crap out of the information that that was coming out. Then the Islamic State came back and doubled down and said that they claimed Stephen Paddock had converted to Islam 6 months ago. So that's in the air. Now, since then, about a week ago, I haven't heard much of anything about him in terms of ISIS. But we noted that radicalized, really didn't say much of anything about an individual, about him having been radicalized. And so, like we said, what you don't say sometimes is frequently can be more important than what it is that you do say.
Yes.
Then there was this article that came out that said former Trump campaign official reports Las Vegas shooter made ISIS tape. Now that was, 5 days later, almost a week later, says authorities not revealing link to terror group. This is by Paul Joseph Watson. And the story went, a former Trump campaign official is making an extraordinary claim. He leaked information from within the White House that Las Vegas massacre gunman Stephen Paddock made an ISIS propaganda tape, and that authorities are refusing to reveal that the mass shooting was a terror attack. Stop. Sean, I got to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
Very little has come out. What has come out has been extremely conflicting. Let me throw a what-if situation at you. What if it turns out that this guy became radicalized under ISIS?
Okay, so when you ask me that question, are you asking me...
And that's 15 days ago.
Are you asking me because it hasn't been released yet, or...
I'm asking you what you think the reaction in the United States would be if it's discovered that was true.
Horrific. And here's why.
And further, that they'd been sitting on that information for 15 days.
Yes. And you know, I get it to a point, and everyone can say, well, what do you mean you get this to a point? This is, how could you say that? You don't trust the FBI, and you don't trust government. And I said, well, to a point, you're 100% right. But I also understand part of the investigation. I understand how they have to approach it. And just like I was talking about before break, you saw with the Boston Marathon bombers and holdbacks, if they know who they're looking for, or they think they know who they're looking for, or maybe they don't know who they're looking for, but they know there's other people, they don't want to scare them into flight. Right now, and I know even me saying this might even be, it's not like these people probably didn't think it, but right now, they kind of have the element of playing Mickey the Dunce, where it's like, well, I don't know. We don't have anything, right? We don't have anything. Hoping that it keeps them underground enough, or hoping that they think they have time to flee and come up on a radar somewhere. I understand that part of it. However, we start getting into the question of when does the country have the right to know and when does it not? It's a hard question to answer.
It's a very difficult question, particularly considering if you're trying to determine where these potential suspects, further suspects, or further persons involved in some fashion may be. Let me ask you this, because I think it leads to this question. Do you believe that he acted alone?
No.
Okay, now, so what are some of the indicators to you that makes you believe he did not act alone?
Okay, so let's talk about acting alone, right? You have a how old was he, 66?
64.
64-year-old man. I don't know the type of health he is in. However, I do know that if he is the lounge lizard casino player that they say he is.
And that's what I expect, looking at photographs.
I don't believe that he's a health nut. I don't believe he is a 64-year-old man that runs marathons. So now I immediately have the physical question of how did he single-handedly get all of that firearm and ammunition and all of that stuff up into the room by himself and hide it enough that when the people who delivered food and cleaned the rooms every day and all that other stuff have been around, nobody saw anything. That's my first indicator. Number 2, the shooting itself.
Now you're concentrating on things that I think few people have thought about.
Endurance.
The physical aspect
yes.
of actually having to do what he did.
Yes. So bump stock, fully automatic doesn't matter. You talk to anybody who's served in any of the teams, SWAT, SEALs, any of our special ops guys. You talk to any of them and you say, hey, how long can you go full rock and roll before you're just completely exhausted? You're starting to lose your muzzle control. You're starting to lose, even guys that have been overseas fighting, to be sustained for the period of time. And what are we talking, 14 minutes of shooting?
Yes, and literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Hell, he shot 200 rounds through the door.
Right, so now you're looking at, I believe there was 6 weapons that they found that had jammed. So that is 6 weapons that he had to discard, pick up a new weapon, and begin to engage again.
And that takes time.
That does take time. I also have questions as to the type of firearms that were in the room. So fully automatic, endurance, I don't think the guy has it. He wasn't former special forces. You start talking about his accuracy. Now, I know that he's using a long rifle with the bump stock into a very, very target-rich environment with a lot of people. However, he did not have tracer rounds. He had no way other than guessing when he saw people go down where his rounds were actually going. We know that on that piece of paper, he may have his dope worked out, right? He may have his windage, his droppage, his distance, all that other stuff.
And that's the information that I have about that paper. It didn't have anything to do with the suicide note. It had calculations, mathematical calculations.
And Paddock was a smart man when it came to numbers. He was
Correct.
A smart man, and I have a feeling he was one of those people who was probably extremely intelligent, and it was almost scary. But he worked out his numbers. Okay, that could have been anybody, and I'm not downplaying those who have been trained by snipers or understand dope, windage, and droppage. The reality of the situation is that takes a different set of skills than just Googling, etc. So you look at that. You look at the endurance it takes, how heavy the equipment was, prepping for the attack. He had food delivered a couple hours prior. And now he set up 2 nests, as they're calling it, platforms, set up all of his firearms where he wanted them, set up all of his spare magazines where he wanted them. But for a guy that organized the room so well, which he would have had to have in order to be that effective and put that much fire down suppressed for an expressive fire for a consistent amount of time with 6 jams to be able to drop, pick up another one, and go again. The room was a mess from the pictures that we've seen. There were guns strewn all over the place. Now, it's not to say that after one jammed, he wasn't just throwing it behind and pick up another one and go, but it just doesn't suit who he is. He was a very meticulous person from everything that we know.
Well, you're doing the logical extension. You're looking at the situation, you're looking at the photographs, and you're trying to figure out how it is that he organized this. So the first question that I had is, okay, 2 broken windows, apparently used a hammer to do that.
I think a 3-pound sledge is what I read.
If you're one individual, why would you need a second window?
But so I'll give credit if we're going out
unless
the single shooter theory, though. You're a smart man, as he is. And I'm going to stick with the single shooter theory for Paddock.
Okay.
You know that once you start cooking off that much ammunition in a room, you're going to have smoke filling that room.
That's right.
So, and if you're already working out your windage, your drop, and all that other stuff, you have to think ventilation. Because if he's single window out, the room's going to fill with smoke to the point that he's going to be choked out. So you break another window, you now have ventilation. If anyone who's been in the desert knows that there is a constant breeze all the time that's going, that's going to ventilate the room if you're going single shooter theory.
Well, the other thing is that you could make an excellent argument for he had a second window because he had a cache of weaponry at the one window set up prior. He had a cache of a second cache at the second window so that when because here's the other thing, when you fire weapons in a semi-automatic or even a fully automatic or a bump stock fashion, they're going to get warm really quick.
Yes.
And you're going to have to place them down and maybe go from this window over to the second window.
Or
fire those, let those cool, go back to the second window.
But now you're running up and down this hallway, and if you look at how big this room was, 64-year-old man.
Thank you.
You're now okay, so let's argue that he was smart enough to try to set up like a pincer move, right? Like he's trying to get fire on the right, fire on the left, keep everyone kept in the middle, right? Let's say he worked that out. That takes a hell of a lot of running. While you're running all this trigger time, while you're manipulating weapons, your adrenaline alone from conducting this sort of attack is through the roof.
No matter how you've practiced, and now they realize that he's practiced in the desert, just like I said. The state of Nevada is one big damn gun range.
Right.
And even though you've practiced and become familiar with all these weapons, just like you say, the adrenaline dump is massive, absolutely massive. So I would suspect that some of those jams may have come from him basically limp wristing or limp shouldering a rifle.
Yes.
And caused a stovepipe or a misfeed just from that. And that can be directly attributed to the massive course of adrenaline that's running through his body. So do you see how conflicting it is, folks?
It's really hard to imagine that one person pulled off this act.
We can make a good argument for there was one guy, 2 windows, ventilation, etc. We can also make another argument for 2 windows,
multiple
2 guys.
people or more.
Or more.
We don't know. And I say more for a couple different reasons. And look, let's look at his setup, right? If you're a single individual, you have no intention of leaving that room, you are going to commit suicide as soon as you are contacted by law enforcement, which, if you go off of how he died, that was his plan, right? Why would you not barricade the doors out?
Well,
you have the endurance to run up and down hallways. You can drag the bed, you can drag the couch, you can do all these things to the single entry and barricade that doorway so you're making them breach a hard wall. If he's intelligent, and we say he is, then why wasn't that done? Also, he has all that thermite down in the car. He had all that ammonium nitrate.
That clearly indicates further action.
Why did he not booby trap the entrance to the room?
Here's another thing that you could have done. We know he had an assload of money.
Yes.
He bought 2 rooms that connected. Why not buy a 3rd room? Don't break the window of that room. Use that room to make an escape point down. He should have had an escape point already pre-planned.
If he was going to escape,
that was his goal, and evidence seems to indicate that was his goal.
If he was going to escape, or if the plan was escape, why did he screw the door shut? The hallway stairwell door. Now, anyone with half a brain has to know that when you're 37 stories up, 32 stories, law enforcement isn't coming all the way up the stairs if they can avoid it. They're going to get on the elevator, the service elevator maybe, and they're going to come up probably 2 or 3 floors shy and then come up the rest of the way on the stairs. So when you screw out that door, yes, you're going to force them to that other side maybe if they can't breach that outer door from the stairs into that hallway. If they can't breach that door, they're going to go around. But you've also, if your plan was to go mobile at 64 years old and pulling off this attack, if your plan was to go mobile afterwards, why would you screw shut the only quick way out of your room?
And again, these are continuing conundrums that befuddle everybody.
Everybody. And this is the problem I have with this, right? You're starting to put all of this on a single individual. Front to back, start to finish, inside and out. It is just highly unlikely to me that a single individual could pull this off. Now, the timeline changed. We know that when the security guard made contact with that door, 200 rounds were put through. Jesus Campos took a round to the leg, got onto his radio, allegedly notified his security personnel, and SWAT was notified then, and they hadn't responded yet because he hadn't fired a shot out the window yet. So the people down below, nobody else except for people on that floor knew that there was a shooting in progress. After he shot the security guard Campos, that's when he activated the rest of his plan and took action on the Aldine concert. So you have to start looking at timelines. Why would he waste a shot going through the door at the security guard? If he's a smart and intelligent person, okay, so you have your camera set up, and maybe this guy will find your cameras, your counterintelligence that he set up, counter-surveillance rather.
Well, see, again, another good point. We know for a fact he had cameras in the room. We know for a fact that he had a camera outside the room. I don't know, Wi-Fi, whatever the hell it was.
Yep, so I can tell you exactly the type of cameras are. They're a Wi-Fi home camera. They don't have a recording option per se. They don't have a hard drive attached.
They might be exactly like the cameras that we're using right now.
Not even like those. All they take is a power source, and you can buy a router and set one up in any room you want. It doesn't have to go online per se. It just has to communicate with the network that you're on to be able to access it. It can be an internal network versus an external network. So he has counter surveillance.
But again, another question.
A peephole camera. He has a
Yes.
camera that is designed to go on the peephole and see out the door. And if you know anything about cameras, those are very, very specific in order to adjust for distortion of a peephole. You can't just put any camera against it and have the same visibility as you would as a specific peephole style camera.
You've got a fisheye anamorphic lens,
Yes.
which is what that's called,
Yep.
affixed to that door. But that begs the other question again. If you install all of this stuff and you intend to die in the room, why do you do that?
And why do you commit suicide? Honestly, why do you commit suicide? If you're going to die in that room, or if you're going to commit suicide, you're down the end of that hallway at the corner waiting for them to come down the hall, and you're going to pull the trigger just before they hit your room. Okay, you have counter surveillance. You can see them. You know when they're coming.
Exactly.
So why would you do all that, not barricade the door? The not barricading is the biggest thing to me so far. You only don't want to barricade if somebody in that room wants to get out. If he's going to commit suicide in that room after committing this hellacious and terrible act, why would he not barricade the door so he could continue to engage that crowd until the last possible moment? And he didn't. It was a very easy breach that they made considering.
Let's see, when was this? October 10th. The timeline changes. Las Vegas police on Tuesday last Tuesday, defended changes in the timeline of the deadliest shooting in modern United States history. They say Jesus Campos, a guard at the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino, was shot by Stephen Paddock at 9:59 local time, 6 minutes before Paddock opened fire in a country music festival below.
So here's the other thing about that. 6 minutes.
Why?
Why was there a delay?
Why that massive delay? Because as soon as you fire out into the hallway,
you're going to engage.
Any logical person is thinking, well, fuck it. Everyone knows I'm here.
It's time to go.
We need to engage.
Right. Now, I've heard the argument that maybe Campos scared him and he wasn't quite ready. He was doing his last-minute prep. He shoots Campos. He finishes the last couple things he's got to do, and he goes. Maybe.
I don't believe that.
I don't believe that whatsoever. I think that room was fired, ready to go.
Planned this for days. He's been up in that room for days.
So let's say there was other shooters. That 6 minutes after the rounds were blasted out that door could very well have been when Paddock met his demise before the attack. There's a running theory that he was alive during the entire attack. If there was somebody else there, and again, I don't know, and this is a little tinfoil hattish, I understand that, but if there are other people in that room, maybe Paddock offed himself immediately when the guard was there going, uh-oh, the gig is up now. Maybe he did kill himself right away. And then whoever else was in the room had that freak out moment of, what do I do? Do I run? Do I stay? Do I run? Do I stay? Well, screw it. We're already here. Let's go.
You sent me an audio cut that originally was 18 minutes long.
Yes.
And then I took that to Camtasia and I recorded it because I found that the day that you sent that video to me,
It went bye-bye.
The original uploader, whoever the hell it was, took it down.
Yes.
Then it appeared again. You found it. You and I were texting back and forth, and I said, look, I was looking all over for this thing, and I can't find it. You came back and said, okay, here it is. It's gone to another place. So I went to Camtasia, and I downloaded it. For whatever reason, it's still there under that particular individual. And, folks, I have it. Listen, because on this, maybe you can do a little bit of a setup as to what this was.
So this is the taxi cab driver. A lot of the taxi cab drivers have their own in-car cameras for numerous different reasons. Insurance, whatever, doesn't matter. They have it. This is a taxi driver who was approaching the Mandalay Bay for a pickup when the shooting started. You can hear the taxi cab driver articulating some things, mostly just interjection, not necessarily factual. But you start to listen to the rounds, and you start to listen to the gunfire, and you start listening to echoes.
Yes, exactly.
And I'll explain. I understand that echoes are different depending on where you are, right? If you have sparse buildings and some are bigger than others in the background, then by the time the sound hits maybe that first building and then travels to that second building, you will have a delay in response. But it will be consistent to the original sound.
Folks, I want you to go to this right now. We're going to play it in just a minute. I don't know if we're going to have time to play the entire thing. But obviously, because it's a video, one of the primary points of this video is we believe we know, that the shots were coming from the 32nd floor. If you go to this video, and I'm going to give you the title on YouTube so you can go there and watch yourself and tell us what you think. In this video, the reason it became so important is there's visual evidence to indicate there were shots fired from a much lower floor.
Yes.
Now, also, when I play this video, listen to the irregularity of the gunfire. When you hear irregular cyclic fire, that's the bump stock.
Yep.
And here's the other thing. You talked about physical, the physical element of that. A bump stock, as opposed to a fully automatic weapon or even a semi-automatic, tends to beat the crap out of your shoulder as well. That's physically demanding.
And your trigger finger.
Yes. And an excellent point, because when you hear the cyclic rate slow down, that's because he's getting tired.
The pressure is coming off the trigger finger. It's slowing the recoil of the bump stock and slowing the rate of fire.
Yep. So let's listen. By the way, if you want to go there, go to YouTube. The title of this is called Taxi Driver Video, the Zapruder film of the Las Vegas shooting, uncut, unedited, 18 minutes long. So if you go to YouTube and just put in Taxi Driver Video, Zapruder film, Las Vegas shooting, you should be able to get to it. So it's 18 minutes long. I want you to listen very carefully. And if you get the video, watch for the secondary fire. Listen to what the echoes are. And again, this is taken from the interior of a taxi. And they have no idea what's going on yet.
Yeah, it does. It sounds like automatic gunfire.
And when this was rolling, the shots had already been fired, the first couple rounds of shots. That's why you can hear first responders responding in the background.
Yep. Now, as the taxi driver, as she's recording this...
Now it sounds like it's coming from farther away.
Can you pause it a sec?
Yeah. Did you hear that? She says it sounds farther away, and she specifically makes a comment about the distance.
Right. And so you get that first volley in that's on this tape. It's extremely loud and present. Now, perhaps she was under the corner of the hotel, and he was 37 stories up directly. And now she's in the same spot, and he's moved back into the other room where the other window is broken out. But the amount of concussion that you're getting out of that first volley of rounds, the da-da-da-da-da-da, was piercing, even on the camera. The second one is very muffled, so he was either further into the room, he didn't go as close to the window as he did the first one, or he was further away, or the shots were coming from elsewhere. And again, you decide, because right now we don't know.
With this addendum, her camera hasn't moved.
Nope.
So from the first initial shots we heard until the ones that sounded like they were further away, she has not moved her automobile at all. Okay. Close. Damn close. And she's starting to move now.
Right. Here's the other thing about that. You start talking about the echo of the buildings. Sound travels very slow in comparison to light. Sound is slightly faster than smell. You look at the response of that first volley of rounds, and you had about a half-second delay. Now you have overlapping rounds almost instantaneous in this specific volley of rounds. Also, if he's firing at this rate of speed where he's hitting on one side, walking down the hall, hitting on the other, walking down the hall, hitting back and forth, if you're going on that theory, single shooter walking back and forth, how is he able to fire the amount of rounds when he's doing 30-round volleys in a 10-minute period by himself?
Well, and we know the distance between those two windows wasn't 5 feet.
No, you're talking 35, 40 feet.
So there definitely had to be a pause if, in fact, he was moving.
That could be the pause, is that he's moving back and forth between the two windows.
Back and forth between those windows.
I will absolutely agree with that. But it does bring up some questions when you listen to that very last volley. How many actual shots were being fired by how many weapons?
Folks, we're going to take a commercial break. We're going to come right back, and we will continue playing that video because I find the audio on that
incredible.
It's incredible. And again, go to that video, the Zapruder film, Las Vegas shooting on YouTube, and watch it. And you tell me if you don't think that you see flashes of light that correspond with gunfire from a much lower floor. Folks, stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, it's Shaun from the Sackheads Radio Show. Also one of the owners here at the SHR Media Network. Are you opinionated? Have you ever wanted to do your own show? Have you ever heard somebody like the Sackheads and go, yeah, I could probably do that better? Well, now's your chance. Send me a 5-minute clip at sackheadsradio@gmail.com, and maybe you can be part of the SHR broadcasting team. sackheadsradio@gmail.com.
Beware, the Jersey Takeover is here. Every Monday through Friday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can catch River Common Sense Show hosted by Jersey Joe, right here on shrmedia.com. Only Jersey can deliver hell like no one else. So consider this your fair warning.
Human by race, Christian by faith, American by nationality, and conservative by choice. Reverend Ralph J. Chittum Sr. is the right guy on SHR Media from 8:05 to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday. And if on the rare occasion I am ever wrong, I will still always be right. The right guy on SHR Media.
Power brokers use corrupt politicians, deceptive Islam, and lies from establishment media to turn the once shining city on a hill into the city of the blind. What do the elites fear? One man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me at SHR Media, High Plains Talk Radio, Spreaker, iTunes, and YouTube for a different kind of commentary on the unpleasant blind guy. Because truth is not always pleasant.
Hello, I'm Tim Hart. I'm the guy BZ hires, due to his shameless contract with the SHR Media Network, to voice his promos. He'd like me to tell you that the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show can be found on SHR Media Network, Spreaker, and YouTube every Tuesday and Thursday night at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific, featuring right thinking from a left brain and doing the job the American media maggots won't. You'll find that the speech is free, but the drinks are not. There, in the saloon, just when safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, BZ is sending his personal drones of freedom into the wheelhouses and ossicles of lovers of sovereignty and liberty nationally and globally. Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, BZ swears that no rights were harmed in the making of this promo.
This is Jersey Joe, host of the Reverb Common Sense, and you're listening to SHRmedia.com.
This is an SHR Media Network special report.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you're listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon. It's Tuesday, October 17th, the year of our Lord 2017, and we are encountering an SHR Media Special Report. Sackhead Shaun and I are speaking, and have been up to this point all night, about the Las Vegas shooting. We were listening most recently to a video, and I gave you the location of where it is. I want you to listen to it on your own and also watch the video on your own. Let's continue listening, because there appears to be not only aural, A-U-R-A-L, discrepancies in this, but also visual discrepancies if you go and watch the video. Taxi driver video, the Zapruder film of the Las Vegas shooting, uncut.
There was also a video that was circulating around the day afterwards, or a picture rather, that showed up on Twitter and Facebook. I tried to link it to you. I could never find it again. That was a faraway view of the Mandalay Bay that showed either a shadow or potentially a different window that was not in place on the lower floor.
You told me about that, and
I have never seen it since.
We both
I've looked for it like crazy. I understand the amount of work it takes to replace one of those windows. I understand that the fact that it would just happen and nobody would realize it would be pretty obscure. But I did see the photo. I don't know when it was time dated, but I can tell you it was further enough away that you could see the 37th floor and the two windows broken out the Paddock's room. And it looked like another window on the 4th floor. I understand that my tinfoil hat is shining brightly right now, but I'm telling you what I saw.
The problem with that is that on social media, things come and go, which is another clue. When you see something that you think is significant, you better snag it while you can. We're continuing with the sound. And again, this is the interior of a taxi cab driver.
Something's going on.
Now, do you hear the difference, folks, in the cyclic rate? Whoever is shooting, they're using a bump stock right now because the cyclic rate is not consistent. That's how you can tell. It goes a little faster, a little slower. That is not a fully automatic weapon.
And also, where's the echoes now?
I'm not sure why people...
Bingo. Bingo. Now, she has moved.
She has moved.
She has moved the automobile. So depending on where she is, you might get some acoustic differences.
Mm-hmm.
But why are they so massive?
People aren't running, but there's a security guard. What is he doing? You know, for there being gunfire, sure doesn't seem like people are running.
This is the other thing that I found.
Oh, shit. Seriously, I don't know what's going on.
Now, again, did you hear the cyclic rate slow down towards the end? Because whoever's pulling the trigger is getting tired. That's a human element now.
Well, and also the size of the magazines. These are easy 50-round magazines. However, we're up to, what, 3 or 4 magazines so far, it sounds like? I don't know specifically, but just given the...
At least.
I don't imagine that he is, unless it's a jam, I don't imagine that he's dropping a weapon or reloading with ammunition still left in it.
Now the taxi drivers are starting to talk.
Where are the cops at? I'm right here by the porch at Mandalay Bay, and everything just seems to be normal here.
Okay, now stop. I have to make this interjection right now. She is completely, there is an absolutely unimpeded view between her car and the Mandalay Bay in the background. There is nothing in between her automobile and the Mandalay Bay. You can see it because it's lit with the vertical stripes. There's nothing to interfere with that. Did you want to say something?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay. And you heard the cyclic rate slow down, so we know what he's using.
But he also knows, and some of that could be mental, he knows he's getting to the end of his magazines, so he's releasing pressure a little bit.
I'm also looking to see at what point we're going to be in a position so that she captures flashes of light. I mean, right now, she is directly underneath the Mandalay Bay.
She's, if you know the Mandalay Bay, she called it the porch. It's almost right underneath where he was, if my memory serves. But the other thing, too, is, in BZ...
Yeah, we're just all sitting... We're just...
You'll also notice there's been no response to the hotel yet that we can hear. Pause it for a sec. So, I don't know what their response is for Las Vegas PD for an active shooter in the hotel. I don't know where they would respond to. Mandalay Bay is a very giant property. I understand that. But, and I also know the shooting's coming out of the front, so law enforcement most likely will not enter through the front of the building, fear of getting shot from the top to bottom. However, you are not hearing, in the background right now, the same sirens that you were hearing earlier.
Because if they were there, you would still hear them. There would be the Doppler effect,
yes,
but you would still hear them in the background.
And the audio from those sirens would be bumping off whatever the firearms are bumping off of. Now, maybe they were shutting down early. Anyone who's worked in law enforcement, you know that sometimes if you're getting to a scene, you don't want people to know you're there, i.e. a bad guy, you're going to shut down a block and a half, 2 blocks away.
Bingo.
But this is also a major, incredible response that's starting, and a lot of those people are just going.
And you would...
And maybe they go into the back.
Everyone would be responding
but
on this.
You're already looking at an 18, 19-minute... Because, you remember, Campos was shot 200 rounds. The call went out, shots fired, 37th floor. Campos was hit. The call was already to LVMPD. So they would already... You'd already have the first couple units on scene arriving to the hotel before they could even know that there was an active shooter outside the hotel. And that they did have something to fear going to the front door. And like I said, they probably have a set response run schedule where they know which door to show up in order to get to area X, Y, and Z. Those guys are amazing at what they do. They know how to get out of those hotels very, very quickly. But the fact that you're not hearing sirens galore, even going to the other side, is just very weird.
You'd hear a massive amount of sirens.
Yes.
And yes, even if you were shutting down 2 blocks, 3, 4
it's
blocks
a concrete
away,
village.
You still would hear this response.
I just talked to the Metro Police over here at the airport. They said do not go to Mandalay Bay. There's multiple shots fired and they need lots of medical there. Do not go to Mandalay Bay. Stay away from there.
Now hear the variable cyclic rate again.
Bump stock.
All right, I'm leaving. This is ridiculous. I don't know why people aren't leaving. This is insane.
So that's the other strange thing with all this, BZ. Pause it. If Campos was shot 6 minutes before the attack took place, 200 rounds, you would think that information would travel fast through that, through the casino, and evacuations would have started.
Exactly. There would have been some... You know for a fact there are already active shooter plans on file.
Absolutely.
With each and every major hotel here.
And once they hit that evac note, or maybe they're just evacuating the people upstairs. I know it's Vegas. If you know anything about Vegas, the gaming will go on. That's one of the Vegas's mantra. It will
That's
always
true.
be gaming, and that's not. It's the reality, because that's where the money is made, is on that gaming floor. It's not events. It's not anything else. It's the gaming floor. However, once you say there's an active shooter in the building, I cannot imagine that they would risk not evacuating everybody. And if Campos was truly shot 6 minutes before the first round went out the window,
that's 6 minutes for you to at least to instigate that program.
Activate that program and start getting people out. And you're going to have people who are fleeing that floor itself. 37th floor of the Mandalay Bay. You can't tell me that people didn't hear those 200 rounds and started to haul ass, get down to that lobby, run through, somebody shooting upstairs. You're going to get the fire, screaming fire in a theater.
You're going to get the people that don't listen to directions and don't go out the right door.
Take it from me. I've seen it happen
Always
firsthand.
happens. Now, in this, I should like to point out for the people looking at the video, I have not seen one person looking like they're upset.
Anybody. It's bizarre.
In this video, and she comments on that.
Everybody's just standing around. It doesn't seem like anybody's moving.
Now, she's near the taxiway, the taxi stand for the Mandalay
It seems
Bay.
like it's coming.
Full shots fired. They don't even know the details yet. I just talked to Metro over here at the airport. They're still getting the details, but there's multiple injuries.
You guys, there's
and,
a shots fired.
That's all they're telling me. They're not telling me anything other than that. They just said stay away from there. They're shutting the whole place down.
Now, all during that, not one shot.
Yeah. Still no shots. You're going on like 2 minutes.
This is crazy. I don't know.
So what's he doing? Is he reloading? No, he wouldn't be reloading. He's been practicing this for months. He's had this set up for days. So he sure as hell is not reloading. What's causing him not to fire?
It seems like it's coming from.
Okay, stop. Here we go. It's at 4 minutes and 57 seconds. If you start this video at about 4:50, 4 minutes and 57 seconds, you're going to see some flashes. Now, listen for the gunshots.
From up there. Oh shit!
Right there, 4:57. You can see clearly in a lower level there are flashes of light corresponding exactly to the shots you hear. Now, I say to you folks, watch this video and you tell me that I'm a gibbering idiot, because I don't believe so. Let's listen to it again, right around 4:50, 4:57, somewhere right around there. Let's ooch this up just a little bit and listen.
It seems like it's coming from up.
Okay, now you've got a view of the Mandalay Bay and the vertical lines of that motel.
There. Oh shit!
And the flashes start when the gunfire starts, and the flashes stop when the sound stops.
And we know sound travels slow.
Well, and this isn't more than about maybe 100, 150 yards
So that's my
from
point.
where she is.
That's my point. For it to be corresponding that well with the sound and the shots.
That's close.
That would be amazingly close in an open area.
And if you doubt me, folks, go, like I said, find the video, go listen.
All right, I'm out of here.
Now, you can listen to the rest of it. It's 18 minutes long. It goes on and on and on. But I think we've made our point.
And I got to give the cab driver credit at this point. One of the things that gets missed about this video is she actually now starts picking up people and driving them to the hospital. If you watch further in the video, and I think that's the same video, where a couple people jump in her cab and she gets them to the hospital. And I think I read something about her that she actually made a couple trips back to help.
Oh, God bless her. I did not hear about this aspect. Now, here's a cut that I'd like to play from Fox News from retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer. And he weighs in with regard to who could be responsible for this. Tony?
Kathy Griffith fake beheading the president, things like this, I think, are what's pushing a lot of folks to believe now that somehow violence is an acceptable piece
Is
of their
politically
as politically justified. Exactly.
Well, we will see. I mean, it's an.
Okay, wait. Went too far. Let's back this baby up. Here we go.
He's been in contact with sources in law enforcement. Tony, good evening.
Hey, good
to
evening.
see you
Good
tonight,
Martha.
as
Thank you,
always.
Martha.
What do you make of this today, given what we now know?
Well, look, I think it's shaping up to be a very deliberate act of terror. This is beyond dispute. The question becomes motive. Everybody seems to be searching for a motive. Martha, I would argue most of the clues of the motive is right in front of us. First off, this individual parallels in many ways by age and by predisposition of being unstable the shooter who attacked Congressman Scalise back in June, the Hodgkinson attack. Very similar age. They are both considered unstable. And so in many ways, after talking to both a psychological professional and some other folks in law enforcement, there's a lot of parallels there. Let's look at the target as well. It was a politically selected target. I think the target being selected, and let me say this is the
Okay, do you agree? Is that a politically selected target?
Well, it depends on what you're trying to do, right? So if you are a hardcore leftist like the Scalise attack, then yes, you have to guess that the vast majority of people that would be at a country music concert would be a conservative group.
And did not an arseload of the people that sent out tweets say something similar to, hey, this is great. Obviously, at a country music concert, these are Trump supporters, and let them die.
Absolutely. So if you're going to start going down the Antifa leftist side road, which is possible, and that doesn't mean that ISIS isn't connected in some way, shape, or form. That just means that we're sticking down that road. It absolutely could line up with that. Or, and again, if he's an individual shooter who just lost his mind because of the amount of money that he lost or whatever, then it was just a target-rich environment. Speaking of money,
okay,
this individual was extremely wealthy. Everybody knows that. When he is gambling with a lot of money. He is gambling, as some people said, up to $1 million a night on video poker. I don't even know how that's possible, but okay. His girlfriend, why did she say he bought the ticket for her to get out of the country? What he told her was, hey, I got a cheap fare on a ticket back to the Philippines. Here you go. Here is a man who's walking into video poker. I understand gambling addictions. I understand all of this other stuff. But he had multi-million dollars. We know that. He had apartment investments, real estate investments, retirements, money everywhere. I don't know enough about his finances to know if the money matches up to his assets, because he's spending a lot of money. And he's well known there. He was actually an a-hole to a lot of the staff at the hotel, they've said. So he's that well known that he's an a-hole. He's a whale, so they deal with him, but he's an a-hole.
Bingo. And his room first got comped.
Yes.
Which is why there was a problem with trying to figure out when he first got there.
Yes.
He first arrived earlier
than
people thought, because he arrived in a room that was given to him for free by the people there at the Mandalay Bay.
Got it.
I know. There we go.
Trying.
So that begs a ton of questions.
But I'll tell you right now, one of the things that he had said was he bought her the ticket because it was cheap. Why would a guy who spends all of this money
give a crap about the price of a ticket?
Over a couple $100, right? And then turn around and wire her $100,000 after the fact. I'm just saying, that does not match reality.
It doesn't compute. So let me throw a bunch of questions out for you and for everybody. Photos of Stephen Paddock, his hotel room, they were leaked. And one of the photos appears to show some kind of a note. Why wasn't anybody told what was in the note? Because apparently it's leaked. One set of facts, one set of individuals said it was, in fact, a suicide note.
Mm-hmm.
And then another group of people said no, it had to do with azimuth, elevation, and windage notations that he'd made to compute the fire, triangulated fire from down on below. Here's another thing. He didn't have any military training, but he took a page right out of Sun Tzu, and that was this. You attack with superior firepower, surprise, and a position of advantage. There is no finer position of advantage in tactics than that of elevation.
37 stories up.
And
because you also know that your armed resistance from down below through the windows is going to be non-existent.
So the other question...
You have to come through the door.
Oh,
and
yeah.
again, it brings me back to why was the door not secured?
Well, the other thing is, does everybody remember the photo that was taken from the outside in the hallway looking into that room? And you can see a weapon lying on the carpet with a bipod.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look closely, you can see that that is a double door set. The doors on the door, singular, on the right is appears to be untouched. But you can't compute, why is there a big hole here? Is the door open? No, the door is not open. So what happened to the door? Was that from the breach? Who knows?
Or was that from the 200 rounds you put through it?
Was that from the 200 rounds?
Well, and here's the other thing, too. When you start talking about breaching, if they show up to that front door, and I don't know if he had two rooms that were connected, so I don't know if...
Yeah, which door that was affected.
Right. But you looked on the ground behind him, there's a lot of brass on the ground, so that says to me that he shot out that door at some point. If he shot out that door at some point, you have to surmise that it probably went towards that security guard. Why, knowing a little bit about tactics, would law enforcement make their breach where he's already fired through the door, knowing that he can fire through that door and it gives him a position of advantage?
Well, the obvious answer is no, they wouldn't.
Right.
So, again,
but if they did breach that door, why? And they used an explosive breach. They did not kick the door. They did not use a ram. They used an explosive breach. But we also don't know if they went through the wall or if they went through that door. That door could have already been like that when they got under the floor and they said, we can't go in there because he's got a position of advantage. Let's go element of surprise, move halfway down the wall, breach through the wall. I don't know. I haven't seen the inside of it. But I can't imagine that the tactical team leader would allow them to go through that door unless they had no other choice.
Well,
but you have a second door.
That's one element that brings up the question, okay, which door was that?
Mm-hmm.
To which portion of the suite?
Mm-hmm.
The one on the east side, the one on the west side, what was that? Then we brought up the issue of the additional shooters, the taxi driver film. I'm telling you, folks, go to that video and you tell me if Shaun and I are crazy.
Jersey Joe says we are. He says that the light continues after the firing is completed.
No, not that close. Nice try.
But I know that on a different level, there was a fire alarm that was activated, a white strobe, but it was not consistent with the rate of fire that was coming out of the weapon.
No, and it wouldn't have started precisely when you hear the shots, and it wouldn't have ended when the shots stopped.
I disagree with Jersey Joe on this one.
Why were the law enforcement authorities discussing, and at one point on the radio, they were discussing a suspect on the 4th floor?
Yes.
That was on radio, and I just played audio for everybody here, illustrating to me that I would say, in my estimation, I could understand that would be a 4th floor. It might be a little bit higher. It's impossible for me to say. But what I can say about that, and I bet you can too, is that's not the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay.
So we also know that in these sort of incidents, you do get a lot of bad information, right? You get people who see one thing for a split second, and maybe they saw that flash and said it's about the 4th floor, maybe. Maybe they saw that fire strobe. However, understanding that, I don't know if that information came from a law enforcement agent officer who was on the ground looking at the Mandalay Bay and said, hey, there's gunfire coming out of that window. I would err on the side of believing him or her, just based on their training and experience. Now, maybe they were wrong. Maybe they were getting some sort of odd reflection. Maybe they were not seeing what they thought they saw. Anything is possible. Anytime you're dealing with witnesses, by and large, you could ask 15 people to look at the same thing and get 9 answers by the time you're done that were different. I understand all of that. However, it is very, very bizarre that the 4th floor has been said by numerous people, not just
there is
that radio traffic.
A continuing thread.
Absolutely.
And again, like I said from the very beginning, you look to see if you can identify some kind of a systematic process or a pattern or a trend that's occurring. That's how you tend to piece all of this stuff together. There was also a paragraph from naturalnews.com, and they ask a really good pointed question that you had already brought up first. Far from being a Navy SEAL, Stephen Paddock is a retired accountant senior citizen with a gambling problem and a flabby physique. The only way he could have carried out this shooting is if he were transformed into a human superweapon through a magic wand. I'm calling this Mission Impossible because of the physical impossibility of a retired, untrained senior citizen pulling this off.
A very, very, very unlikely, BZ. That was one of the first questions I asked you.
Yes.
Is, hey, 10 years ago, do you think you could have pulled this off? 15 years ago, do you think you could have pulled this off? With training and experience and time to get ready for it. And if you're doing that much training going into this, somebody in your life has to realize the changes in your behavior. Somebody. Even if you have 3 friends, the girlfriend, hey, I'm going to go out to the range again. Hey, I'm going out to the range again. Hey, I'm going to start running. Hey, I'm going to do all these tactical reloads inside the bedroom with and dry fire weapons just to get the practice in. Hey, I'm working on my elevated shooting from an upper level to a lower level, and I need to work on my dope, my drop, my windage, all of that stuff. Somebody's going to say something. It's bizarre to me. You start looking at the single shooter, you have this highly, highly, highly intelligent man. Why did he book 4 other hotel rooms across the country, all corresponding with events?
And did he not, if I'm not mistaken, did they not discover that he had booked a room in Boston?
Yes.
And that he was thinking about something to do with Fenway Park.
Overlook Fenway Park. So, but here's the issue with that. And this goes back to the multiple shooter scenario. And this goes into something else that we haven't discussed yet. Is he an in-between for a gun running scenario?
Oh, hold that thought. We're going to go to a break because now we're talking a potential crux of the biscuit. But I ask everybody here, listening live, listening in chat, listening and watching on YouTube, on Lone Star TV, and Facebook Live on the SHR Media Facebook page. So what was it? What was the indicator in this guy's life which would have warned people that he was about to cork off? Can you answer that question? I cannot. Folks, we're going to take a break, and we're going to be right back. And Shaun went here a little early, but that's okay because we will address some more tinfoil hat crap. Hang on, we will be right back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, it's Shaun from the Sackheads radio show, also one of the owners here at the SHR Media Network. Are you opinionated? Have you ever wanted to do your own show? Have you ever heard somebody like the Sackheads and go, yeah, I could probably do that better? Well, now's your chance. Send me a 5-minute clip at sackheadsradio@gmail.com, and maybe you can be part of the SHR broadcasting team. sackheadsradio@gmail.com.
Times are dark. The people are misled by corrupt politicians, lied to by establishment media, and deceived by the false messages of Islam. A nation looking for direction needs a guide. It needs a man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker, SHR Media, Pundit Press Radio, and YouTube through the SHR Media page for a different kind of commentary on the unpleasant blind guy. Because the truth is not always pleasant.
In a world controlled by corrupt politicians,
You got a business. You didn't build that.
a team of ordinary men emerge from the ashes to give voice to the voiceless and hope to the hopeless. Sackhead Shaun.
Dude, I'm not saying half of the stupid promo.
Sackhead Clint.
All good friends of ours usually show up drunk.
Also starring Sacco as the producer.
I'm a little bit drunk, 'cause I'm drinking.
They are the Sackheads Radio Show. Every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific on SHRmedia.com.
The bloviating Zeppelin. He's Bigfooted enough radio shows to last a lifetime, courtesy of Sean, Clint, Ken, and Jersey Joe. Now it's time for him to waddle on his own 2 feet via the glorious SHR Media. Gird thy loins for the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, coming soon to ossicles near you. Excelsior.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are listening to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show. It's an SHR special report. I am here in the SHR Media Studio with Sackhead Shaun. It is Tuesday, October the 17th, the year of our Lord 2017. And we're discussing the Las Vegas shooting. During the break, we were talking about the photo that was taken of Paddock, who apparently, people are trying to intimate, had committed suicide. And even in that photo, almost every photo that we see, there are discrepancies that do nothing. They don't answer questions. All they do is raise more questions. And one of the first things that you mentioned was what?
The blood in the suicide photo.
Yes.
So one of the things usually with photos is it does...
It answers questions.
Because it's a solid snapshot of time, right? If you have the stomach, and I don't encourage this if you do not have the stomach, but if you have the stomach, you can find his suicide photo online. I have some theories as to why these photos were taken and sent out pretty quickly. I don't know if I will even discuss those right now because it gets into some very strange places, but...
I'll go one place. They were sent out to indicate that this guy, it's like the JFK shooting. There was one shooter. This is the guy. We have him, and he's dead. Look, there's the photo.
Or somebody said, hey, we got to get these out before the feds show up. Who knows? Just saying. That possibility's there. But so you start looking at his suicide photo. You see him in a supine position on the floor.
Correct.
You see numerous rounds of ammunition behind him. I don't know where his body was positioned in the room per se. I just haven't seen the layout enough to be able to articulate where he was.
I'm trying to remember. I think there's a couch behind him. You can clearly see that it's the same carpet because it's the same pattern.
Yes, it is.
There is a pool of blood above his head.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also see that there are large caliber pieces of brass
Yep.
in that blood.
Right. 5.56, 233, 308, something around that.
Whatever it might be. I'm guessing that it was probably a lot of 223 or 5.56
Yep.
and probably some 308, 7.62
thrown into it. So all that being said, if you've ever seen, I think he was a Pennsylvania state senator, or he was a Pennsylvania state, he might have been attorney general or something, but he
got caught up in a big scandal.
The long story short, he removed a 357 from an envelope and committed suicide on local television.
Yep.
If you've ever seen that video, he is standing up. The moment he pulls that trigger, the amount of blood flow that drops down, gravity takes over and goes down his body in the half a second before his body hits the floor, is immense.
Well, it literally, in that video, it is a cascade
of blood.
It is like a fall, like Niagara Falls.
It is ridiculous, the amount of blood. If you look at the Paddock suicide photo, first and foremost, the first thing you'll realize is it was not a rifle round that did it because his head is still intact. His eyes are still open. His ears are still attached.
Yep. Or a shotgun, anything of that nature.
Would have caused traumatic, and I mean, obviously the shot caused traumatic, but it would be to the point that it would be so destructive you would not be able to tell who it was. You would not see the eyes in place. The nose would be removed, a whole bunch of other things. Also, there would be burn marks all over his face because of the flash that any of the large caliber weapons would leave. You now see Paddock supine, little bit of blood underneath the lips. There is some blood there. I'm not saying there's not, but the vast majority of blood flow from his face is from the nose upwards, up towards the top of his head. That would suggest to me, and I'm not an expert on this, but based on my knowledge and some experience, I'm going to say that this does not suit what gravity naturally does to liquid.
Okay, I found the photo, I'm copying it, and I'm going to put it in chat for those of you who want to look and see.
If you do not have the stomach, do not look.
In terms of what Shaun is saying, the evidence is there. There is very little, if any, evidence to indicate that he was in a standing position when he committed suicide. So, what do people usually do when they commit suicide? They make themselves a little bit comfy. Maybe they lean back. Maybe they sit in a chair. They don't lay down. That has not been my experience.
And I can understand if he thought the cops were outside the door and he had to end it quick. Okay, fine. So you stand in an upright position, and it's the last minute, boom, I'm going to pull the trigger and die. However, that also did him being supine perfectly, not slumped to the side, not curled up in a ball. Look, you're standing, the weight's over your legs. You pull that trigger, it shuts off your electronics, and you crumple down. You usually don't fall perfectly flat on the ground.
No, you don't. And if you look at the photograph that I've put in the chat room right now, you can see evidence of that. Now, clearly, there's an assload of brass.
Tons of brass.
All over the place. You can see that there is a revolver, stainless steel revolver with black grips at the top of the photograph that I've included in there. So the intimation was, okay, was that the revolver that he used in which to commit suicide? If so, how did it happen to get about 4 feet above his head?
Right.
If you look, there's another photograph also of him where the head is at the bottom of the photograph. It's vertical, if I'm not mistaken. His legs are towards the top of the photograph. And there's a long gun over one of his legs. How did that happen?
Right. So if he used that said long gun to commit suicide, as I said before,
there wouldn't be anything left.
Very rarely is there anything left, right? I'm not saying it's impossible, because if he pressed the barrel directly to the roof of his mouth and pulled the trigger, and it went straight to the back of his head, the part that we can't see in that photo may have only been affected, right? But I've heard a couple different theories. Hey, when SWAT entered the room, he was in the chair. They had to check him for explosive secondary devices. They pulled him flat on the floor. Okay, except for the fact that the blood stain is clearly there from his head from the suicide. So that doesn't really fly. It was that long gun, but that long gun didn't do the damage that it normally does, and or you can't see the whole back of his head is removed. If the whole back of his head was removed, you would see gray matter splattered everywhere. I mean, everywhere around that. Or if he used a pistol, a revolver like the one that's up there, and it was a ball tip. Anyone who knows anything about ammunition will tell you ball tip has a tendency to just keep going.
Yeah, that's not JHP, jacketed hollow point. It's just what they call round ball.
Yep. And that ball tip will go, it's actually more scary than a jacketed hollow point. Jacketed hollow point usually disperses within the body and does incredible internal damage, but doesn't exit as often.
A ball will keep on going.
A ball will keep on going.
Its merry way.
Yep, like it's nothing. That also could explain why the amount of his head was still intact, was that he used a ball round to commit suicide. But it still doesn't explain the inconsistency with the suicide from a standing position, that he ended up perfectly supine, the revolver 4 feet above. Now, if he fell back and it was in his hand and he let it go and it sailed out of his hand, okay, that maybe there's distance there.
On the other hand, history has told me that if that's one of the occurrences, you would also tend to see his arms towards his head out, or you'd see them maybe out a little bit more vertically, like this.
He wouldn't lay flat on his back.
He wouldn't lay flat on his back, and his arms would not be what appears to be by his side.
Right.
That is completely inconsistent.
And more often than not, and I'm not saying that it's here, but he would be on one side or the other in more of a crumpled position, because your body will collapse onto itself, and then you end up rolling one way or the other. Very rarely do you roll straight back. It just doesn't happen that way. Your hips roll to the side unless you land. Your ass lands perfectly on that ground and momentum carries you back, possibly, but that does not match. His suicide position just does not match.
I wrote in chat earlier. It doesn't pass the smell test.
Yeah,
I've seen tons of suicides. Most are by women, not by men. If men go, they go by gun.
Yep,
95% of the time. But they don't. The inconsistencies here are sufficient. And again, we take it the totality of the circumstances, not just this one element individually by itself. Here's some other questions. Why were all the entrances blocked at that concert? At the time that he was singing his song, all the lights went up also. That was a perfect time to illuminate. Well, that's exactly what they did. They illuminated Paddock's field of fire. Right. It couldn't have been timed any better than that.
But the other side of it, too, is you're still at night with tracer rounds. Without tracer rounds. That distance, 400 yards, 4 football fields, to be laying automatic fire, and your drift is under control so well that you're not starting to sail above the crowd. He did it a few times, or he intentionally overfired the crowd because there was rounds found in the jet fuel tank down the far end of the concert grounds. It's another question that I've brought up right away.
Okay, we're starting to run out of time. We're in the final segment, so I'll tell you what. We might want to cut to the chase, and there was some aspect that you brought up. And as soon as we mention this, I can guarantee you there's going to be some folks in the audience that are listening to this live or in podcast, and they're going to say they're going to make a really easy conclusion, or they're going to say it's an easy conclusion, which is this.
You're a loony.
And we're not. And that's this. Start it, and then I'll take off and run with it.
So I've heard this theory, and this is not too far outside the realm of possibility. We have seen this before, that he worked for the feds on some level as an in-between for a gun-running operation. Now, before everybody thinks I'm totally insane, before everybody says take your tinfoil hat off, before everybody says we've seen this before, ask the family of Brian Terry.
Just listen, though, folks.
Fast and the Furious was a gun-running operation. The gun was used, it killed Brian Terry, a Border Patrol officer. That was one individual gun. However, it is despite the fact that people have said that we want this to end, it is an action that has continued and has been in place for 20 years, targeting specific groups of people by selling firearms illegally through them from the U.S. government, using a store or a shop as an in-between.
So, point one, the government has done this before,
yes,
resulting in one death.
Yes.
One death.
One known death.
One known death. So
right.
Let's go further, though. Let's go back to the early 1980s. Let's go back to Barry Seal, who made an arseload of money running guns down in southern South America. So the government does, in fact, have a somewhat lengthy history of doing something like this. So with that said, continue.
Now, why they would pick Paddock, we don't know enough about his history to know why the CIA or whoever it was.
Was he an undercover?
Was he an undercover?
Was he a CI of some sort that had some kind of information? We know he was fascinated with guns and knew a lot about them. And did someone think that he was running with a pack of people who might be interested in something like this?
So I haven't heard much about his travel habits, but how did he pick up a Filipino wife if he wasn't a world traveler? And I ask this question to everybody I know who's in the military or worked for the government. Usually when a male shows up in America with a wife from a different country, the Philippines, Asia specifically, who did they work for and what were they doing there? More often than not, the answer is they were either in the military or they worked for the U.S. government over there in some capacity or another. He worked for Boeing, I believe it was, as an accountant way, way, way back when. That's where his retirement was. He has his plane that he owned, according to, I think it was FlightAware, was owned previously by what could have been a legit company or a shell company, and then the Department of Defense. It's a little Cessna 172. This guy had connections to government in a lot of different ways. He had high-end clearance because he's an accountant at Boeing. You don't just do that because what you're seeing of Boeing, especially in the Las Vegas area with Skunk Works being at Area 51, which is just north of there, you have to have some sort of background and clearance. Look, he doesn't have a big social life, no social media presence, none of that other stuff whatsoever. He is a man who did not want to be found. Why do you not want to be found? Because you have something to hide. It is very possible that he was a go-between, and I have seen this theory a bunch of times. This wasn't my only theory. That he was a setup man and a go-between for a gun-running style operation. Or, legitimately, he was a complete corrupt criminal, and he's an arms dealer. And it's very, very well that that's where his money that he's gambling away in a casino every night, because if you know anybody who knows casinos, drug dealers, illegal operations constantly use casinos to try to launder money and make it clean again. You get that dirty money that you got, you run it through a machine, you run it through a table, you cash it out. It doesn't get reported to the IRS whatsoever. You have what's called Title 31, but it's different. And it comes back to you in what is now a clean roll. I may know a little bit about this operation on some level or another.
I bet you do. And folks who are listening to this, you would be wise to listen to what Sackhead Shaun is saying with regard to casinos.
Let's say he's one or the other. He's either a CIA government spook or just a government spook in general.
Now, making that assumption, let's go back to the room. Let's go back to the evidence that
or
we
an
see.
Arms dealer. He could very well be an arms dealer and explains money.
Okay. So, if you're an arms dealer or you're about to attempt to make some kind of a sale to persons who are interested in weapons, and you've got all these weapons in the room, now, who's to say that you wouldn't want to take the money and take the weapons if you're a bad guy or a series of bad guys? And obviously in a situation like this, it would be him on one side and likely more than one person, a couple of people on the other side. Would you, if you were doing that deal and decided that you were going to take both halves, would you let him live?
Right. And so let's say he is a gun runner, which explains why he constantly picks rooms with a high volume of people nearby so he can blend in, disappear as his clients. Or a government spook, the same type of situation. Let's go down. I'll get away from the government spook so people stop staring at my hat. Let's say he is an illegal gun runner, and he's purchasing these weapons to sell them as an in-between. He doesn't care who they are. He's a monster. He doesn't care what children die. He wants his money to feed his casino habit and retire happily. He makes a deal with a group. Doesn't matter what group that is. I'll say ISIS just for the hell of it. Say he makes a deal with ISIS. Hey, I will have this amount of guns and ammunition in this room, ready to go. All you have to do is come up, give me the money, we'll cart them out. Very, very possible that they went, awesome, we know exactly what munitions will be in that room and we can attack the Jason Aldean concert across the way. Perfect.
Well, and especially when you're dealing with a vast number of weapons like that. Now stop. Let's throw this into the mix and you tell me how wacky this is. If he's going to be making, it's another if-then equation, if he's going to be making a deal with weapons, would that not tend to explain why possibly he would have explosive substances down in his automobile, which for whatever reason he hadn't yet taken up to the automobile itself? They could have been, those substances could have been part of the original deal or transfer that was going to occur.
Or a separate deal 3 days later.
Or with another set of persons or individuals.
Right. Now, if you're a bad guy, and people always roll their heads, but this stuff like our eyes, but stuff like this does happen. You're a bad guy. You're going to walk up those stairs, and you have a needle. That needle can be filled with whatever liquid that you want. That will put somebody night-night right away.
Rohypnol, very popular.
Very easy to get. If you can buy Coke off the street, you can buy Rohypnol from people who work in medical buildings. Medical drugs get sold all the time. People don't want to hear that, but it's a reality. You jam that, you pin him to the ground, jam the needle in his ass, and then you kill him on the way out the door. Very, very likely. I guess what I'm saying is I'm not going to venture a guess to say I'm not going to come out and say, hey, this is exactly what he was doing. He may have been a government spook, and this whole thing went wrong. That doesn't explain the sniper, quote-unquote, sniper nests. It doesn't explain a couple of things. But it also would answer the questions of why there was believed to be multiple people in that room based off of food receipts. I know that's just a waitress that we're basing that off of, but the food receipts show that there was potentially more than one person.
It went guests, :2.
Yes.
And then an amount of food that you would customarily associate with not just one person.
But 2 people, at least. The variety of weapons that he had in the room, folks, if you were going to do this massive attack, and you know that you're going to use semi-autos, bump stocks, you'll need 20 of them. Let's just say for whatever reason.
You're going to want long guns, period.
Let's just say you don't want to change magazines. You're going to stuff 50 rounds and 50 round magazines in 20 different rifles that have bump stocks on them. They're all going to be pretty much the same. So your nomenclature is perfect in your head, and your effectiveness is at the highest rate it possibly can be. I've seen bolt-action rifles. I've seen shotguns. I've seen a revolver. I've seen some other weapons in those pictures that make me go, who would be buying this?
Well, further, who is going to be stupid enough, if that was the correct scenario, to use a bolt-action rifle when you have 22,000 targets down below, and that's what you want to do anyway? Just kill as many as you possibly can. With a bolt-action rifle, are you kidding me?
Well, so you start getting to the argument of, well, maybe after everybody was settled in place and he didn't have as many targets, he was going to swap to the bolt-action and start sniping individually. Okay, fine. Let's have that argument for a second. If you're going to be laid out in a sniper position with your eye on the glass trying to find your targets, you don't want to worry about that door opening. It's going to be barricaded.
Well, and
the lack of barricaded door, to me, might be one of the biggest signs that are getting missed by everybody following this right now.
Well, and if you want to leave that room rapidly,
you're going to go through the door. Or the door was a little bit barricaded and somebody left and removed it prior to law enforcement arrival.
There are just so many
Where's
questions.
Jesus Campos?
Well, there's another question. This is from GatewayPundit.com. This was back on 3 days ago. Update. Vegas security guard Jesus Campos skips 5 interviews.
Still has not shown up.
Including an interview. He was aligned to speak on Hannity's show. He goes missing, and now his family is under a gag order.
Well, wait.
Why is that?
It gets even better. So, allegedly, he was with a fellow security officer, and this comes from his union rep. He was with a fellow security officer. They were supposed to do an interview. He said to his fellow security officer, hey, I'm going to go to the restroom, or I'm going to step away for a second. Calls him and says, I didn't feel well. I'm going to the hospital, or I'm going to get checked out at a medical center. Disappears.
Well, there you go. That's on Fox News. Las Vegas guard Jesus Campos vanished after visiting urgent care clinic, union leader says.
Right. So you look at an urgent care clinic. All right. You're Jesus Campos. You're doing all these interviews. You're starting to feel unwell for whatever reason. Maybe your gunshot wound is opened back up. You've opened a couple stitches. Are you going to go to urgent care, or are you going to go back to a regular emergency room? You're going to go to a regular emergency room. Urgent care is for coughs, colds, and boo-boos.
You're a hero. Mandalay Bay is going to want to take care of that.
Yep.
Because now you're a very public face
Right.
to Mandalay Bay.
Jesus Campos has disappeared off the face of the planet in the last 3 days. He hasn't done one of his interviews. His union wanted him to do those interviews. Look, if the union came out and said, we didn't want him to do these anyhow, but he's just, it'll be a little bit different. His union was encouraging it because they thought it would be great for the stature of security guards in Las Vegas. It would be an amazing story to tell. Some people say, well, he's ducking because of the story got changed. He didn't put the initial story out to public.
He didn't have anything to do with that. And further, no one would accuse him of having anything to do with that. In their mind, he would be the person that they'd want to talk to because he fell into the hero model.
The other thing about Jesus Campos, I'm not questioning what the police department says about him. I'm just drawing a couple things that have bothered me. He originally went to that floor to check for a door open alarm. That means one of the stairwell doors was left ajar. It's a fire code violation. They have to be closed. So they're alarmed. After a few moments, it'll send an alarm to a security center. They'll send somebody up to check it. If the door was held open that he was checking was the one right outside Paddock's room, which would be the only reason why he'd be in front of Paddock's door with no knowledge of what Paddock was doing, that's the one that was screwed shut from all accounts so far. So how can you get a door open alarm from a door that is screwed shut?
Well, would it not make sense that if you're going to escape, you're going to have something pre-planned?
Well, unless he damaged the sensor while he was screwing it shut. Totally possible. I'm just looking for inconsistencies in the story. So why would he be sent to the 37th story if the door was not open? And why, if you're Paddock and you're intelligent and you're about to pull off this humongous attack and you have CCTV, you know Vegas security guards wear the bright yellow shirts. You can't miss them.
Can't miss them
Can't
at
miss
all.
them. Why, if you're looking through your CCTV, would you just unload on this guy out in the hallway?
because that obviously gives away. He's not looking for your door.
Yeah.
He's looking for another door.
I'm not saying that Campos is any sort of a bad guy, but my question is if he was inside of that room and took 200 rounds at him, or if there was a second gunfight within that room, did he engage it? We've heard a second set of gunfire. We've discussed that, the possibility. Hey, did he hear what did Paddock open up on him and he booted the door and tried to stop him, figuring maybe he was a madman? Went the absolute hero route. 50 guns on the ground, he grabs one and gets in a gunfight with the guy. How do you get 200 rounds and only get one round in the leg? How do you get 200 rounds? That's 4 magazine changes on a 50-round magazine through the front door if you're Paddock. And why were those rounds not heard? That echoes like crazy down that hallway. Something does not match with the Campos story. I'm not saying he's a bad guy. What I'm saying is something doesn't line up. And for me, it's more likely. Look, I'll give the kid credit. Maybe Paddock opened the door, or maybe the door was slightly open. He said, "Hey, there's a gun in here." Went through the door, and Paddock started shooting at him. He picked up that one that was on the bipod and shot back. Maybe. Who knows? But what I'm saying is the story does not match what we're being told. The evidence that we see so far does not match what we're being told, and I hope I'm wrong about all of it.
We're going to go, I can tell you right now, we're going to go a little bit into overtime.
Couple minutes.
Because there are just too many unanswered questions. I'm going to wrap things up with a final article, but before I get to this, I want to ask you, let's theorize that Paddock was doing some kind of a deal involving weapons, and you fill in the blank as who you think it might be. People that are running guns, people who are linked to ISIS, people who are linked to terrorism, whether it's gangs, cartels, it's almost immaterial. What would happen to the United States and what would happen to the government? What would happen to the FBI, the BATFE, and anyone else who may have been aligned with an operation similar to that, where you have 58 U.S. citizens killed
500
and 530 plus people injured? What would be the fallout for that? Oh, my God.
Well, and let me ask you this. If you're the federal government and you're trying to keep something under wraps, and Campos has information that you're afraid will get out into public, where is he right now? We start talking about this. We start saying he was a government spook, or he was a gun runner being watched by the feds and they didn't act, and this happened as a result. Either way, if they have some sort of culpability in all of this,
the potentialities are staggering.
Incredible.
They're absolutely staggering.
Incredible. Because you look at the Pulse nightclub shooting, you look at all these other shootings, right? It was an attack that was explainable. Sandy Hook, severely demented, and I know there are people who think Sandy Hook was a leftist attack in order to promote gun control. Either way, it was a single shooter who was demented and went in. This is on a different level. You look at 400 yards to fire full rock and roll and kill people. You're talking about the setup, the amount of equipment that it took to get up into that room. You're talking, what, 45 guns in the room?
Planning.
45 guns in that room. Never mind the ammunition, how much weight that was.
You'd have to move X number of carts, the little carts that you have.
Luggage carts.
That you put all your stuff on. You would have had to make so many trips. Wouldn't someone somewhere say,
what is going on with that?
Sir, can I help you with that?
Mm-hmm.
Because it looks like you've done a lot of moving.
And he's a whale at that hotel. He gets customer service up the yin-yang.
He gets
His
it
face
first.
is known. And if you've ever been to a casino and you see anybody who is a regular gambler who is considered a whale, a really high roller, they are seen all over the place. The people in the eye, we call it the eye in the sky, will see him walk in and say, "Hey, somebody go help Paddock. He just came in through door X, Y, and Z, and he's pushing a huge cart." Those people get taken care of hand over fist as soon as they get seen on camera, and they are seen. There is facial recognition that pulls it up and says, "Hey, look, this guy's in your hotel again. You need to go kiss his ass."
And folks, you need to listen to what Shaun is saying, because Shaun knows exactly about this. One final article. And again, none of this, it just keeps going. It just keeps going. This is from Disclosed TV. 4 Las Vegas shooting key witnesses are now dead or missing. Is there a cover-up? And just by listening to that, you think, oh, come on. What a bunch of crap. One of the folks that has been found dead in her home at the age of 28. The cause of death has yet to be confirmed. She's a key witness to the Las Vegas shooting, named Kimberly Suchomel, Suchomel. She was one of the lucky ones at the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino who managed to escape the hail of bullets without being injured. She was questioned on her story. She said there was only one gunman, and she was 100% sure that she was right. Why is the media not reporting this? What
was she the one who posted the video?
Now that I'm not sure. But she wasn't the only key witness that seems to have perished since that Las Vegas shooting. Another guy, John Bellman, who was wanted by federal agents following the discovery of a communications device in the hotel room of the officially identified shooter, Stephen Paddock, killed both himself and his disabled daughter in apparent murder-suicide. In addition to that, a valet worker named Chad Nishimura, who parked Paddock's car, has also disappeared after giving a statement to local news networks about his brush with the killer. It was, of course, finally wraps up, Jesus Campos. Where is he?
Yeah.
So I submit, folks, none of this makes any sense, and if you're thinking that we're all tinfoil hat wearers, again, I say look at the trend. Look at the consistencies, or lack thereof, the inconsistencies. One of them taken, each individual aspect of this case, taken in a vacuum, is easily explicable. You put them all together and run through each and every one of them, and all you have are more questions. The only answer I have is there's a lot more to this case, and I believe we are specifically being kept in the dark because of this.
First, Kimberly Sochel has been reported by several news outlets as being a key witness who claimed there was a second shooter and allegedly posted video or provided video of said second shooter. I'm just telling you what's on the internet. I cannot independently confirm this.
I didn't look. You obviously have a more recent article than I do.
I'll tell you right now. Let me pull it back up. This is, and by the way, she's from Apple Valley, California. I can confirm, at least to a point, that she's dead because there's numerous online memorials for her with people that are obviously close.
Why no American media maggot coverage of this? Why
Geopolitica,
no coverage?
which is a Russian newspaper. However, I'm not saying this is fact or this is not, but posted on Sunday the 15th. Identified Las Vegas this witness who identified multiple shooters and found dead. And it went on to say, Kimberly Sochel is a key witness who had identified multiple shootings during the Las Vegas attack. A key witness in the Las Vegas shooting attack who identified multiple witnesses has been found dead in her home. And it just goes on and on and on and on and on. However, I guess the official narrative is that she may have committed suicide. But it's just bizarre because she says, according to some people that she had talked to, she described what the nightmare she went through. She said multiple gunmen were not only firing weapons into the crowd, but chasing people down and gunning them down as well. She was chased by a shooter. We were rounding some sort of corner, and I saw this large cowboy sitting down with his legs spread, holding a woman's soaked head. I thought I need to hide, she said. But as I looked for somewhere to go, the gunfire once again got closer and closer. We couldn't hide because they appeared to be chasing us. This is her account. Now, again, I know witnesses under stressful situations
certainly
can absolutely missee, mishear, misunderstand. However, at the bright young age of 28, to have her light extinguished, I don't know if it was suicide. I've not seen the report, and perhaps it was from after such a traumatic incident. The murder-suicide. I can't live with this and what I saw, and I don't want my disabled child living with this and what they saw. Monstrous, yes, but I understand that mindset can be there. However, it's very strange to have that happen with a woman who is a key witness.
Can you think of any other case in United States history where there have been so many discrepancies, so many obvious discrepancies in terms of evidence, photographic evidence, audio evidence,
video,
video evidence. I cannot think of any case like this.
Let's look at a couple of the other question marks that get sent into this, right? So now you have witnesses who are 4 witnesses in 2 weeks who have perished. It just seems like a large amount. Campos, why did he disappear? Maybe the stress of it got too much and he just needed to go into the woods for a couple days at a friend's cabin and relax. That's possible. I'm not saying it's not possible. Very odd.
Well, is he in WITSEC? And if so, why?
Why is he in WITSEC if the shooter is dead? If the only threat to him, witness protection, by the way.
All this does is beg more questions.
Let's look at the Reno house. The Reno house was secured by law enforcement almost immediately.
Oh my God, we even forgot that.
And you look at the Reno house, and it was processed over a course of 3 to 4 days. Law enforcement, after they found or didn't find what they were looking for, cleared and left the house alone, which was very strange in itself.
Number one, we call it possession.
Yep.
You have possession of a house. Mm-hmm. You have possession of a crime scene. That is clearly a crime scene of major national and global significance.
Yes.
Why do you give it up?
Why do you just walk away from it after 4 days? And the next day, they left it on a Friday, I believe that Friday after the shooting. And on that Saturday night, it is burglarized.
Yeah, neighbors call in and say, hey, there's something really strange going on next door. And yeah, there it is. It's a break-in. It's a burglary.
But nothing was taken from what I've seen.
Or is that true?
So as far as nothing, if you're one of those people who are just trying, so there's those sick people out there that want to get like stuff that he touched and everything so they can sell it on eBay, right? Those weirdos where they're like, oh no, I know I can get a lot of money because he's this mass murderer, and if I get some of his property, I can sell it on eBay. If you're those people, then a whole bunch of stuff's going to get taken in a burglary, right? Because you're going in with bags and you're just grabbing any personal effects you can and you're dumping them into a bag and getting the hell out. If nothing appears missing or disturbed, why did somebody burglarize it? Unless they were looking for something very specific and knew exactly where to find it.
And had a pretty good idea that nobody else had discovered that either.
Yeah. And again, I'm not saying this is the case. I'm just saying this is a possibility.
We're just throwing this out in the ozone.
Absolutely bizarre to me.
But the entire situation begs these questions.
Yep.
You cannot not ask these questions.
And I could tell you, just from my knowledge, when you have a burglary scene like that of major significance and importance, you know media and a lot of other people are going to start showing up to try to get inside that house and try to get that look, especially the news media. Those cameramen will try to burglarize that and get that one, maybe find that piece of paper, whatever it was, or just that after effect, or video through the windows. And you...
haven't seen those, have you?
At all. And you, law enforcement, would be sitting out in front, keeping people outside. You've talked about what you've heard versus what you haven't heard, and sometimes what you haven't heard is a bigger, more significant thing. We're talking potentially a couple thousand people involved in this investigation. Even when you get down to the root-based investigatory team, the A-team on this, the ones who are running everything, at this point you're probably looking at 50, 60, 70 individuals, all mixed through different types of law enforcement from all across the land. You have all these specialists that are being brought in, FBI profilers, the person who's a specialist in this and that and this and that and this and that, and on and on. Not one of those people, I should say, has gone to the news media and gone, hey, just so you know, it's looking more and more like he was just a psychopath.
And you mentioned the sheriff of
yes, that's going to be my last point.
The Las Vegas Metro, who is a good guy, and seems, every time I see him, he seems particularly stifled. He seems he seems very upset, and I know it's in his jurisdiction. He's not happy with things. He's not happy with the media. And you have to ask yourself, is he also perhaps unhappy because he's told to take a big cup of shut the fuck up?
Well, so exactly, right? I mean, at this point, this guy's probably working 16, 18-hour days around the clock. He keeps saying he's not close to the investigation, that he's letting his team do it.
No.
He's the boss.
No sheriff.
He's the boss.
Would distance themselves from something this critical.
He's the boss. Everything runs through him, and he knows it. He is working around the clock. He is working nonstop. But if you watch him as time goes down and continues on, he's starting to wear down a little bit. He's exhausted. I know he's exhausted. But at the beginning, he was yelling at them, not yelling, but he was correcting the media, and rightfully so, about the bullshit that they were putting out.
That's true.
And I appreciated that. But now he's not answering questions, and he's kind of lashing out. He's answering some questions, but he's not giving real information. He's kind of lashing out at those that are asking follow-up questions when he says he has nothing. He looks like a man who I've said time and again, I think he is a solid individual. I think he is a team guy. I think he is a good guy.
He is incredibly, incredibly frustrated.
And right, this is a lot of pressure for an individual, and I'm not saying that he should not be frustrated, but if he's just doing his job as the top cop, there's almost a level of ease with that where you're like, hey, this is just what I have to do. But now you start adding the political aspect of it. And it seems very, very strange to me that he is becoming so disheveled in some ways without cause.
What do we know about law enforcement? It's becoming incredibly politicized.
Overly
politicized. What do we know about the FBI? It's already incredibly politicized. We know already that the FBI has consistently, within at least the past 2 years, lied or covered up for many, many things that have occurred.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a post coming out on that. So, who do you trust? And then, is there any wonder, that said, that people are questioning?
Well, right. So you and I, who understand and are very close to law enforcement through our past histories, we have a pretty good understanding of how it works, right? We don't have an understanding on this. We have a lot of questions that are just off the absolute hook that are major questions. It's not little finite detail questions.
No.
These are major elephant in the room questions. The house in Reno to be burglarized and then have it not make national media? And it was burglarized. I'm not making this up.
And people linked to the case, gone, disappeared, or dead.
Right. All of a sudden, it points to somebody trying to keep a lot of information silent. Like I said, maybe Metro is doing it for a reason. Maybe they know damn well who they're looking for and they just haven't caught them yet. That's possible.
Yeah, and you cannot discount that. You cannot discount that.
And they don't want to tip them off. And they're trying to hold their tongue. But I'll tell you right now, you've said this before, I will say this. Something stinks with this investigation to high heaven. And there is a lot more questions than there are answers. And I understand that we as a society of social media, we expect these answers to be quick, right? You have phones and technology, and it's all just coming in all the time. And our news media has even become programmed that way, where they're looking for these direct answers. And we deserve these answers. No, we don't. There's an investigation going on. You don't deserve squat. But what we usually get is the social media response and answers to a lot of things of like, hey, just like with the Boston Bombers. Hey, who's white hat and black hat? Oh, shit, now we have to out it. We didn't want to, but we have to because Fox News is going to out it if we don't. That hasn't happened in this case yet.
Almost every aspect of this case is absolutely uncommon.
Yeah.
And so you have to ask yourself one question. Why?
Why?
I fear that when everything is said and done, number one, people have said you'll never find out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree? I don't. I think we're going to find out.
I think at some point something will come out. Look, if he was just an absolute homicidal, screwball, maniac, asshole, berserk, insane individual, then they're eventually going to come out and say, yeah, we don't know why he snapped. We don't know why, but he snapped. And that's it. That's all there is to it. His wife, he just tried to send her away to make distance, and he gave her money because he knew it was going to get seized once the shooting happened. We don't know. Maybe he had cancer and nobody knew about it yet. We would know that his computers have been gone through and scrubbed out already.
Oh, what?
His toxology. That's another one.
You just brought that up. Well, you're customarily in the county of Sacramento where I work, you're not going to get a tox screen back for about 6 to 8 weeks. Now, if you run this baby through, yeah, you can probably get it back in about a week or so. Well, it's been about a week. Haven't heard a thing about that. But why is it that it takes so long for a tox screen to come back, and yet already they've come back and made an assessment of his brain and said that his brain shows no indication of mental problems, or cancers, lesions, etc. How did that happen so quickly?
Right. And the tox screen, like you said, well, if it gets bumped up, it can be done in a week. You know that body was getting tox screened within 2 hours. That was a high priority tox screen. They're right to the coroner, hey, get right to work on this. We need this right away. The other thing, too, is they haven't released his exact time of death. We know, based on science, that one of the first, and you know probably way more than I would, one of the first things that they do is determine a time of death within X amount of time based on the body cavity temperature.
One of the ways that you do that is you have the ME come in, or a doctor, on that scene.
Mm-hmm.
If they didn't do that, damn them.
Right.
Especially in a case this incredible, this big, this serious.
Right. And I forget what the drop rate for the body temperature is per hour, and I know that there is one.
It depends.
It depends on environment and a whole bunch of other things.
You're gonna get rigor mortis on this guy coming in. Well, actually, rigor is not even there's too short a period of time to even account for that.
Right.
This guy would be flexible until you actually had the body snatchers come in and move him.
Mm-hmm.
But if it was like 6 hours later, yeah, he's going to be in rigor.
Right. Or if it was 2 hours later, his body temperature would be significantly different, right? So they know what they believe when he killed himself, right? Is they think he killed himself after the shooting stopped.
You go for organ temperatures right there
10:14
immediately.
PM. Right. I think it was 10:14 is what they believe.
You look at
time
flushing.
of death.
You look at flushing of the skin, etc.
Yep.
All sorts of ways to help to determine that.
Right, but you haven't heard that. You haven't heard about the talk screen yet. And also, we haven't heard another thing about the girlfriend since.
Yes, we haven't heard much about the interview. They snatched her, if I'm not mistaken, at LAX.
Yeah, from Philippines.
When she came back. So, where's that?
So, there's a lot more questions, BZ, that need to be answered.
I think we're going to find them, and I think when we discover these things, I fear we're not going to be real happy with the results.
I agree.
Folks,
I thank you very much for having me tonight. It's been an amazingly interesting conversation.
I've had a wonderful time.
I am sure a bunch of my friends and loved ones and people that know me are like, wow, he is a little bit more kooky and conspiracy theory than I thought he was. But look, you have to answer these questions. They need to be answered.
You need to be sufficiently open-minded to pose the questions.
Right.
Why is this inconsistent? This thing is filled with so many inconsistencies by people who know inconsistencies when they see and hear them. I am left with nothing else other than to ask all these questions.
Why ask why?
Drink Bud Dry.
BZ, thank you, sir. It's been an absolute pleasure for the saloon. I appreciate the red eyes that was being poured by Fluffy, and I hope to be back soon. It's been a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Oddly enough, I think you're going to be back tomorrow night.
I will be back tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Pacific.
Except
on the
tomorrow
radio
night,
show right here
I
on
get
the
to be
SHR.
over there, and you get to run the board
Yeah.
and everything else. And one of the comments you said to me was, "Boy, it was nice to be able to sit in the chair." And not
Yeah,
have to do
this has
anything."
been a joy to have to not run the entire show. I was just able to talk tonight, which I did nonstop, it seemed like, for 2 hours. So,
But it's the same thing we talked about for the past week.
Yeah.
Texting back and forth, calling back and forth.
Something's just not right.
And it doesn't pass the test. It just doesn't pass the test.
But we'll have more on it tomorrow night on the Sackheads radio show.
Yep. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, I got to thank you for listening to the SHR Media Network special report here on the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, right on the SHR Media Network itself. You want to contact me? You can contact me, bz@shrmedia.com. I got my blog, bloviatingzeppelin.net. I'm on Twitter @bzep. Promotional consideration by the Boeing Company. If it ain't Boeing, I ain't going. And, of course, by Pratt & Whitney Engines. Thrust, you can trust. Thanks to my personal KC-135 Kettle One refueling team with whom I will be consorting in less than an hour, guaranteed. Thank you ever so much for listening live. Thank you for being involved in the chat room. Thank you ever so kindly to Sackheads Shaun. Tomorrow night, the Sackheads radio show. Same bat time, same bat channel, 8 p.m. Thanks for listening in podcast. God bless, take care, be safe. Tomorrow night, Sackheads Radio.
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben.
Good night, everyone. Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children.
Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good
Good night, Jim Bob. Go back to sleep.
Good night, and good luck.